Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Mr, and together with Taurus, we talk about the overlooked, the overshadowed and pushed to the side characters. But there is a glimmer of hope. With enough popularity, those can level up. So fingers crossed, as today we tackle characters that got into the spotlight.
Yes, hello everyone. And I want to start things off right at the basics, the good old definitions of what exactly makes a side character. On the one hand, on the literary side of things, you could argue that they're a character that doesn't have much impact on the story, someone who the plot doesn't really focus on. But in the terms of visual novels, what about not having your own dedicated route? Or what if you're not a romanceable heroine? There's still plenty more to it though, right, Mr?
Yes, exactly. So it's probably dependent on the type of VN, how we classify side characters. So for those character-driven stories that have dedicated endings per characters, we probably reasonably classify everybody who's not having an ending to not be at the very least main character, if not being relegated to be a side character, right? On the flip side, if you have a title with a singular plot, singular ending, and a singular story, one would classify main characters for those who have high impact and most likely a character arc of sorts, maybe a character development during that arc, and everybody else seems to be like a background character to help in the adventures and the story.
And by that, you'd probably referring to some sort of moege, right? Like, what, do you have something from you've read, maybe?
From the first example
Yeah.
of the multiple character, so this would probably be something like Mashiro Iro Symphony, right? You have a high school setting and romantic endings per characters. So whichever character isn't having an ending would be side character, right? On the contrary, you have an Evenico that have only a singular ending, a singular story. And I would say everybody who is in the main group and main party would be the main characters. Those are the most explored. Those have those character moments and deep character development, whereas all else is a supporting cast.
Okay, but what about some characters? Who specifically? Who are the poor side characters who got kicked off to the side and fans just loved them so much that they came begging back from war, huh?
No.
No.
Funny enough,
Oh,
I want to
my
go
heart.
lower.
Oh.
I want to go lower. Before we talk about side characters that leveled up into main character, how about a background character that leveled up to side character?
Oh dear, even more disregarded.
Yes. So, in Sengoku Runs, importantly, the gameplay segment had you create armies and manage an war effort in order to unify the land of Nippon. Okay? And throughout that adventure, you could recruit different kind of units and commanders to your army. And it just so happened that two of those characters had a somewhat unique picture, but ultimately didn't have any dialogue, any kind of event in which they spoke, but they existed in one background CG. But that was enough for them to be popular enough to level up from a background character to then in the next installment to become a side character, retainers to more important main character. The very popular Kenshin got two side character accompanying her. While before, in the previous game, she had no one following her, all that.
Because in these
In the
sort
same
of
vein.
in these sort of army raising strategic tactical games, you have to have tons of units. And some of
Exactly.
them, or probably most of them, are named characters and they're important to the plot and they're specific individuals. But you still need some, I guess, never-ending supply of filler characters in case things go south.
Yeah.
And these two characters you're talking about, that's what you mentioned? These two just basic
Yeah.
designs with just unremarkable skills. No one ever mentions them in the story, whatever. They're just cannon fodder, right?
Yep, exactly. The canon fodder that seems to be spawned from some sort of insert anime character generator, right?
But apparently they lucked
Yeah.
out with their RNG design,
Apparently, yeah.
and
They
everyone
were
loves them now.
loved by community enough to get recognized and evolve from background to side character. So with enough love, maybe we can push it further to main characters, okay?
That's great.
Keep pushing.
In a certain way, that
So-
kind of reminds me of Fate Grand Order. And I know, yes, it's the crappy mobile game. I know everyone has strong opinions on that. But in the same vein, you have a gacha game, and of course, it's going to have an episodic story. And there have been several times there have been NPCs who might have had their own sprite or have played, a role in a story. And fans fell in love with them so much and are so heartbroken to see that they're not playable characters who you can roll for and add to your roster, that there's been sustained efforts from fans in the past where the developers created them as characters, many months or even years down the line. We've got, Aresh, we've got John Alter, usually the waifu characters. But for a while, there was even a joke character, Oda Nobukatsu. It's Oda Nobunaga's younger brother or something, who was so unremarkable in history that the devs said before that they didn't add this guy to the game because there's nothing to work with from historical perspectives. It's like, how can we make a fighter, a playable character with gameplay stuff in here? But fans kept asking for him, and yay, the devs finally relented and added him as a 1-star, lowest rarity character.
Yeah, but
and
wait a
everyone
minute.
celebrated.
Isn't Fate all about historical figures and possessing a noble phantasm that is their culmination of achievement? What would be his? It's like invisibility?
But you're right. It's a typical standard in Fate where the more popular you are, the more recognized you were through history, the stronger you are. And you have someone who is very unremarkable, and that even plays into his character, where he just adores his sister. That is pretty much the extent of his character, and he's very funny about it. To where his noble phantasm is pretty much sacrificing himself just to super buff up his sister, Oda Nobunaga.
Okay, I see.
It's very funny how the gameplay and design goes, but it is a great example of these characters and more and others who were either villains in main story segments or important characters who the fans just love so much that they get to will themselves into the game, just like how you mentioned with Rants. It's very cool examples of these side characters, these, discarded characters who the developers didn't really anticipate getting much love coming around in the future.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's quite a nice surprise, right? Moving from title to see a character got recognition they deserved. It pains me more in the moment. On the flip side, an example from Princess Evangel that had, just to summarize the plot, it was a high school boy getting into all-girls school in order to have a test run for how it would run in co-ed. And hijinks ensue. For some reason or another, he has an excuse that he can persist in that school by himself, and they tolerate him. But at the same time, he has to prove himself. That's a very important premise in Princess Evangel. He has to be on his best behavior and prove himself in order for the co-ed school idea to be realized. And throughout that ordeal, he joins or forms a group of friends. There's 6 characters. Not all of them are on board with the co-ed plan, but that's his role to win them over. Most importantly, there's a character of what I would say small samurai, and she's very antagonistic towards him. And throughout the common route, I have to say their dynamic is very well explored. Every single time he has to rise to occasion and show her that whatever her perception of the opposite gender is, he's not about it, and he's going to show her how the proper etiquette is maintained. And I felt like, holy hell, that's such a nice arc. Surely there will be an ending dedicated to that. And it never came.
Oh no. And
that's one of those chapters, and I specifically picked up a funny picture from that title in which all 6 members of the group gather together, play some board games together, and in that board game, main character has to make a choice. All 6 of them look at him, and then 4 character names appear. And at that moment, I knew 2 of them did not make it.
that's so cruel.
Oh my god!
You have the obvious branching choice of the common route into the heroine routes, and there's six of these romanceable heroines you would think. And then there's only 4 choices. Like, okay, 2 of them just absolutely got snubbed, huh?
And the emotional damage you as a reader suffer from seeing those characters look at you directly, and you cannot pick 2 of them. All of them looking with anticipation, what is your choice? Oh my god.
Oh, that's such a mean way to do it. Oh no.
Oh god.
You have hope. The reader has hope in his head that, oh, okay, well, maybe those 2 are just the locked routes. Maybe some point I can I can raise those flags and come back and the option will be there.
And it never appeared.
Oh my goodness.
It's just so fun. Now, granted, once the fan disc has been released, Princess Evangel W Happiness, those 2 characters had finally the proper routes. Holy hell. So, thankfully we have achieved a good ending, okay? It's just so weird that those 2 characters were so close to the group. It felt natural for them to have their dedicated endings and or routes. It just so happens that they didn't.
That is a good,
Such a shame.
An interesting point, though, in which when we talk about these side characters leveling up, it implies that these side characters didn't have their opportunities in their main game, in their original. And so, fan discs are the topic here. Fan discs are kind of the place for side characters to get their routes, to get their time in the spotlight, right?
Yep.
And so I guess you could say how much of it revolves around just being fan disc material. Because in a sequel, usually visual novel sequels tend to move in new directions, right?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
I feel like that's one thematic distinction between fan discs and sequels. Fan discs tend to focus on continuations of the existing routes, maybe a few other options to characters who didn't get it, exactly like what we're talking about here. And sequels are brand new material, new characters, new scenarios, la-di-da. So when we get to the whole topic of fan discs, should these side characters getting the spotlight, should they be entirely used for comedy and lightheartedness? That's my opinion of what I think of whenever I think of fan discs. Do these side characters, and should they get, dedicated character routes? Should it get into heavy emotional situations? I feel like just keeping it light and happy is the way to go here. What do you think?
I mean, it's not impossible, but I would say difficult to introduce a central drama in a fan disc, because fan disc assume to a certain degree that the story is over and whatever central conflict was has been conquered and resolved in one way, shape, or form, right?
Exactly.
So, in order to interject a new drama or conflict, it has to be either that character specific or maybe, let's say, inconsequential. Like, oh yeah, the next drama is because something appeared out of nowhere. It isn't that much big of a deal, but it's something to move the plot forward.
And I'm asking this. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember, but I feel like, and this is another problem, because fan discs are created after the initial game release, okay? So you have an initial game and you have a fan disc. You could see those two products separately, okay? Now, sometimes in the process of translation and bringing those titles to the West, those two are combined into singular English release. And it's not so easy to spot where the main game ends and the fan disc begins, okay? Because the example I had in mind to answer your question would be from Hello Lady. Hello Lady had 4 heroines, after which you had an access to additional content. I'm not sure right now whether or not it's a sequel or expansion or a fan disc. Why? I'm not sure, because how can I say order it correctly? So you have 4 heroines, and I do believe Hello Lady also featured a true end, okay? So you have 4 endings, then a true end, and then additional content. But additional content doesn't take place after the true end, but rather returns back slightly after the common route and throws an alternative route where the central conflict is still not yet resolved. So it goes back to your initial question. How can you introduce a meaningful character development and or reason for the story? And that's the example. You go back and you unresolve the resolved crisis.
Oh dear.
Essentially creating a what if.
Interesting. I feel like I somewhat agree with you. I don't think it has to be that the main conflict goes unresolved or unfixed. I feel like you can make up something new, but then you don't have the time or really energy available in the limited fan disc time to make it count. Because
I think it also think about this way, right? How much grander the next drama has to be for fan disc? If it's bigger than the original work, that's kind of undermining the original work. If it's smaller, then it's less consequential.
I don't think it's less consequential. I don't think it has to be compared 1-to-1 to the main game. I think they can both be valid and stand on their own. The one example that I was thinking of is actually Shari no Kuni, which is very serious, very character-focused, involving the main character and the several romanceable heroines. And it has plot twists, and it has a lot of character depth involved. It has a fan disc, and half of the fan disc is like a lighthearted continuation following each route of main character hooking up with this heroine versus that heroine versus that heroine, and so on. But the other half of the fan disc is a prequel, where the main villain of Shari no Kuni becomes the main character of the prequel, and we see him like a solid 20 years earlier, where instead of an old man, he is a young man. And Hozuki is a different person. He has a different mindset because it's a different stage of his life. And we meet different characters, even though it's a prequel, and we're somewhat in the same setting. And that is a very serious story in the same vein as Share no Kuni. And we get to see a lot of character depth from this guy, who we originally only saw as the big evil meanie head from the original VN. So I think I still think there's plenty of room to have a serious story alongside other fan discs being more lighthearted and comedic.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how it fits into the level up criteria here. Does it mean that you presented an argument to show a level up for antagonist who was a central antagonizing force and becomes a main character in his own prequel?
Aha, yes. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say as he was a bit character in the original, because he is still the main antagonist, but he's not all that involved in the story. He's mostly a background force while the main character is doing his stuff with the heroines and helping them out. I don't want to call him like a side character, but on the other hand, surely he's not the most popular person around, especially in the fandom. But then you get this main story in the fan disc, where he becomes the focus, and it's very much a level up in a different way. Of instead of becoming, I guess you could say, an agent of the story's conflict that's just necessary for there to show character growth, he becomes a well-rounded character in his own right, even someone to root for.
Hot damn.
But back to the point about a fan disc, I think it can still be both. I don't think side character level ups have to be entirely for comedy. I think it's the easier path to follow. I think it's hard to go wrong in that front if you're just giving the fans what they want. But I still think it's possible.
I feel like to go back to what you alluded before, right? Characters that did not end up having a route in a game that features heroines with routes and or endings. Also, the ones that did have a character development inside a common route, let's say, those are prime subjects for the fan disc that falls into comedic after a story and / epilogue, because you developed them, they were in the story, they existed, they did a lot, it just didn't have an ending. So they are prime example to, you just know, you resolve the drama, give them an ending. Just give them a happy ever after, okay? Resolve it.
That's true.
Whereas I feel...
Oh, yeah.
And to go back to my Princess Evangel example. In the main game, there are 4 main heroines and 4 endings. But the group of characters is around 6, I would say. 6 plus main character. That's the core group. Now, in the fan disc, there's 11 endings. So they introduce way more side characters endings in the fan disc than just those 2 that missed out on the final stretch. And for the rest of those characters, they had to develop them kinda, because they didn't really hang out with the protagonist and or the main group. So those kind of characters had to have some sort of drama surrounding them and or some development, because they didn't really have that in the common route.
So have you ever seen a character specifically who had more of a serious angle going on?
Listen, yes. Would I talk about it and spoil the angle of side character that will surprise you in the fanfics? No, I don't. I don't want to.
Oh, look at you.
Think about it.
Yeah.
this is a very interesting point to surprise someone. Yeah, I didn't expect anything to happen because it was a side character and it will get a fun disc explanation. Boring, right? And then it hits you like, holy crap! Wait, that's way better than I expected. I don't want to spoil that.
Okay, that's fair. That's very considerate of you to all our dear listeners. Give a round of applause to MR. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll spoil something else. Okay.
No. Okay, on a different note then, I guess I can ask you, have you ever liked a side character more than the main character of a story? You ever wished someone else got their side character leveled up, but it hasn't happened yet?
I mean, probably the biggest example from the recent years, right, is how I harped on Venus Blood, Gaia, in which main characters I would define as other influential leaders of other countries that you try to make pacts with in order to stand in a position against the main villain, okay? And each of them, of those leaders, have their accompanying sidekick, right? So you have a princess of one land, and she has a sidekick that is humorous shaman or a mage of the court, something like that. And it just so happens that the pirate land had the most boring main character, and their accompanying side character to that land was the amazing harpy merchant. Like, just swap them already. Swap them. I was so angry. Why you waste so much time with that main character that doesn't deliver, and you waste that potential of that amazing side character, or at least less important.
Sometimes I feel bad for the devs. Like, do they know if they're making a character who's gonna come out boring? Like, you don't hope that. You hope that you're giving something amazing to all your amazing customers who are buying your product and checking it out and all happy about it. Do they ever get that inkling of like, is it too late to pivot off this main character?
Maybe.
Oh dear.
But imagine, let's sit on my look it from my perspective, right? I don't want to be held hostage by needing to pursue a main character that is boring in order to learn more about the side character I am actually interested in, okay? I'm held hostage. I need to go and talk to that boring character. No.
Oh. Well.
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest example I remember from recent year. How about you?
Okay. I don't mean to say have I ever liked one more, but there is one thing I felt bummed out about when I finished reading Saya no Uta. And that is that we didn't get to see more of that doctor, Tanbo Ryoko. I don't want to go too much into spoilers for any reason, but she is suspicious of the events going on in Saya no Uta, and she's investigating in her own way, and she winds up being plenty involved in the events of the VN. And I was really looking forward to see more of her backstory, her own history and build-up, but I feel like a lot was still left on the table when the VN ended. She absolutely could be the main character of a spin-off fan disc, just like we have with all of the examples and all of the other VNs we've talked about so far. She would definitely be prime candidate to see like a prequel of what was going on in the past and how much does she know as she gets up to her own events, and we get to see some more of the other characters leading up to Saya no Uta. So I love how you were talking about more how much you like the characters, and mine is how much of a story is still available for us to really dig our teeth into.
Yeah,
the two different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, because with the Saya no Uta example, is rooting for more fleshed out character to the central plot and the central conflict. Because we no longer talk about a story with heroine based ending, but rather, yeah, there's a central conflict. There's two camps of morality, let's say. And yeah, you want to see the fleshed out the second side, especially from perspective of those very major characters.
So I just gotta still hold out hope. One day, any day now, that Sayonara fan disc is coming.
Yeah, exactly. You need to write to developers and add that character in all the popularity polls you find from Sayonara.
Next year's gonna be the year.
Yeah,
I'm feeling it.
Totally. Yep.
Hey man, a guy can hope.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I get it.
But I think that's a good note to end things on.
Yep. And with that being said, thanks to all our listeners. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and tell us in the comments what's your favorite character that you hope secretly gets her own fan disc and or level ups into the main character. Hey, if you wish strong enough, maybe your own character will get an equivalent of Sana edition from Jafarero.
Imagine that, getting a fan disc with your name on it.
Exactly. Yes.
That's so good. All right. Thank you again, everyone.
VNture out.
VNture out.